Coughlin Jr. here, 6-time NHRA champion. And here we are inviting you into an NHRA Pro Stock pit area. Today we're at my car, the Skag Power Equipment Chevy Camaro. So what is a Pro Stock car? A Pro Stock car is, they've been dubbed the factory hot rods from Detroit since the early 1970s. This car here is a Chevrolet Camaro. Looks like a Camaro SS from 2023. We have a 500 cubic inch V8 naturally aspirated engine. So there is no power adder in a Pro Stock car. If you want a power adder, you move to Pro Modified, where you can run either twin turbos or supercharger or nitrous oxide. But in NHRA Pro Stock trim, we are 500 cubic inches, no more, and obviously no less, because that's horsepower you're giving away. Piston driven V8, naturally aspirated. We run a Holley fuel system, which is a single throttle body and ignition system and coil packs for our fuel injected machines here. All that air is brought into the front of the car through this amazing K&N intake, who's been a huge part of the sport. So Pro Stock cars weigh 2,350 pounds, and that is after a run with the driver in it. Again, just like the horsepower, we don't want to give up any cubic inches. We don't want to give up anything in the weight department. So in fact, we just got back from the scales here at the famed Pomona Raceway, and we weighed about 2,360 pounds with me in the car. So we'll probably take about 2.5 pounds out of it, and then after a run, that should get us to almost the minimum of 2,350 pounds. You look at all the Pro Stock cars have the same rule book to apply to. We're right at 105-inch wheelbases, whether you're in a Chevrolet or a Dodge or a Ford. So that makes the rules somewhat consistent there. We're also allowed the same measurement from the center of the front tire to the tip of the front end, again trying to create equality amongst the hot rods from Detroit here.
Now, one thing I remember, so my dad asked me, he's like, so how much of these are actually stock? So right here at Pro Stock, how much of this like is stock, you know, like off the floor type of thing?
Yeah. In my lifetime in Pro Stock, I started in 1997, ran a couple of races at the end of the 97 year. At that point in time, we had stock parts from a manufacturer, in my case an Oldsmobile back in 1997. The rear quarter panels were steel quarter panels, and the roof itself was steel right from, in this case, the Oldsmobile factory. Rules changed in the years following to where we could run an all composite body, and that allowed two things. One, it was less preparation on the cars to kind of mold the steel to the composites, which took out weight, and it also took out a lot of time and money naturally. Yeah. So this car is an all composite body. We still have to fit a template that the NHRA and the manufacturers come up with together, and NHRA checks us under a template and many different measurements on a Pro Stock car almost every single week. Our NHRA Tech Department does a great job, you know, mandating the rules, keeping the rules fair, because as in most motorsports, boys will be boys, and always try and stretch those rules, I guess.
Right.
But as you step into the cockpit of a Pro Stock car, we're looking in from the passenger side. You see we've got our transmission right here in the center. It's a 5-speed transmission. So we start in first gear. You can follow this gate right here. I'll pull this all the way up forward. That is first gear. About every second, the first 4 seconds of a Pro Stock run, you're shifting. There's a lot going on. So as soon as I pop the clutch and the car starts to accelerate, I go to second gear, third gear, fourth gear, and then the final gear is fifth gear right here forward. So 4 times, almost every second, the first 4 seconds. Keeps you pretty busy. You're kind of microprocessing that entire time. You know, you're listening to the engine, you're feeling how the car's accelerating. Is it going perfectly straight? Is it wanting to pull one way or the other? So you might have to give the steering wheel some input. Just a lot going on in a very short period of time.
So is that pretty much like the difference maker in whether you guys, you know, have to win like Come On or not? Is that like more like?
Well, I think the keys to a Pro Stock run run from behind the wheel. I'll speak from a driver's standpoint. That's after the crews and the crew chiefs have done all their work to it, 60, 75 minutes worth of work, and then we put the driver in there for basically a 6.5 second run. So there's so much that goes into a 6.5 second run. But that's NHRA drag racing. That is drag racing. 2 cars sprinting to the finish line. The first one there is the winner. But the key to winning in Pro Stock is a multitude of things. One, everything being prepared perfectly and ready for the track conditions ahead, and obviously enough to keep you ahead of your opponent. But from a driving standpoint, you have to really focus on doing a very repetitious burnout, backing up from the burnout, the way you pull the car forward, the way you pre-stage, stage the car. You really want to be very, almost robotic, so that nothing changes in the way the crew chiefs tune the car, because if a driver rides the clutch a little bit in the burnout or rides it backing up, it'll put a little more heat into it, and that can cause inconsistencies in your performance. Now to the question now. From the driver's seat, why don't we move around this side? From the driver's seat, as we move around, my key focus is kind of 2 things. One, I need to stay 100% on offense from behind the wheel and trying to cut a near perfect 0.000 reaction time. Pro Stock cars are typically separated by less than 0.04 of 1 second from the number 1 to the number 16 car. And the 0.04 there, that's the difference between, if you're perfect on the starting line at 0.000 to 0.040, that would equalize the fastest and the slowest car in the field. So reaction time is so important. I've got a methodology of the way I sit in the car, the way my body feels, the way my mind feels, and the way my foot sits on the clutch pedal itself right here. So just like a standard car on the street, we've got a clutch pedal, a brake pedal, and a gas pedal. But once I'm pre-staged, I'll roll the car forward to light the top light on the Christmas tree. I obviously have the clutch depressed. I'll push and hold this button on the top of the shifter and give it about 250 pounds of brake pressure. And what that does is puts a little bit of brake pressure on the front wheels, and that'll allow the car to stay put. Now when it's time for me to stage, I'll just barely bring my foot off this clutch pedal, and you'll hear the motor kind of pull down a little bit on that 250 pounds of brake pressure, and the car will start to roll forward. I want to be very careful because I want to stage very shallow. I don't want to overstage and rob a lap's time out of my performance. So that's very important. Once I am staged and my opponent is staged, the clutch pedal's all the way depressed. I'm still holding my thumb on the line lock. I will floor the car. It'll go to a preset rev limit, which is usually somewhere between, say, 6,000 and 7,000 RPMs. As soon as I see the yellow start to light on the Christmas tree as the tree is firing, I'm popping this clutch and letting off the line lock button as quickly as I can. Now at that point in time, the car is starting to accelerate at almost 4 Gs, and we go 0 to 60 in under a second. And so there's a lot going on. As I said, on the other side, I'm kind of processing at this point. Is the car going straight? Do I need to give it any input on the steering wheel? All the while, I got to pull 2nd gear now, and then 3rd gear, then 4th gear, then 5th gear. And as I go through those gears, again, I'm just trying to stay ahead of the car. If it's wanting to drive me one way or the other, I'm just gingerly working the input on the steering wheel and trying to make the most efficient run as I can. But fortunately, majority of the time, our crews and crew chiefs have these cars running pretty efficient and straight, so not a whole lot of input is needed. But I'll be honest with you, the fun runs are when they're kind of dancing around and you got to put some input into it and be efficient. And the most rewarding part to those is when the wind light comes on. But that's what happens. The first 4 seconds in a Pro Stock run is extremely a lot going on with letting out the clutch, accelerating, microprocessing, shifting each gear, and then we're in 5th gear about the last 2.5 seconds of the run. And as I approach the finish line, this button on the right side of my steering wheel here, as I'm approaching, say, a car length or two before the first light, which is about 150 feet before I cross the finish line, I'll push that button. It'll launch both the parachutes out, and by the time I push the button, they launch out. I'm through the finish line, and they're perfectly hitting to slow you down. We do have four-wheel brakes on Pro Stock cars, so in the event of a failure of parachutes, we have a backup, so to speak. But that is what it is like, folks, to put in 75 minutes worth of work in this car between rounds, and then 6.5 seconds on track. So now that you've been along for a ride in an NHRA Pro Stock car, we'll back these cars into the pit area. The reason we back them in is so that the fans right here at the ropes can come right to the front of the cars. They can see the engines, they can see the configurations of them, they can see the crews work, they can ask them questions. We can bring them in the pit area, they can see the inside the cockpits, etc. So NHRA is one of the most fan-friendly sports, and always has been. That's one thing that's always drawn me to it, honestly. As a kid, I used to run around these pits, going in and out of everyone's pit areas. So anyway, between runs, we'll come back, we'll do a series of maintenances. The front end of the car gets all the engine management side of it. The middle of the car gets all the transmission and clutch management, and then the back of the car gets tire and rear end management. So what does all that mean? On the front end of it, we'll go through all the specs on the engine. Do the valve blast, check the valve springs. If there's any adjustments needed, we'll make them. All the while, which we'll go to in a minute, we have a whole crew chief bank that's looking at about 50 channels of data that we downloaded from that 6.5 second run to fine tune or find any errors in our setup. To the point, if there's any issues that we see on the computers, we'll likely just change the engine. It takes about 25 minutes. But as normal between rounds maintenance, we just pull, lash the valves, check the springs, make any adjustments we need to. In the middle of the car, transmission comes out, the clutch comes out, and what Butch will do there is he'll take the clutch discs, takes the clutch apart, puts the clutch disc on a grinder. What that does is it trues the surface on the clutch disc itself every single run. That way the crew chiefs are starting from the same spot every time. Consistency is king here. They'll look at the on-track data on the computers. They'll determine if we need to fine-tune our transmission ratios, and then we'll put it all back together. The back end of the car, Mason's got the tires off the back of the car, cleans the inside of it, the wheel tubs. He'll hand roll the ring and pinion to make sure there's no ill feeling in the way the backlash or the play is there. And again, if the crew chief see anything they want to adjust, they can adjust it in a multitude of ways. They can adjust the transmission ratio, they can adjust the circumference of the rear tires, or they can actually change the rear end ratio itself. And that's what makes Pro Stock so exciting. There's almost an infinite amount of ways to fine-tune a car from run to run and get the most 100% optimum performance out. Let's step inside and I'll show you a quick view through a Pro Stock trailer. So as we can see here, Mason's got the transmission out of the car already from our warm-up. He'll bust it all apart. The crew chiefs will bring them over a piece of paper, and that'll say what ratios to put inside of this transmission here. And that's exactly what he'll do. Say, what do transmission gears look like in a Pro Stock car? Well, there's a pretty cool shot of what it looks like. We have 4 cabinets full of gears for our Liberty transmissions, and there's almost an infinite amount of ways to configure your first gear ratio, your second gear ratio, your third gear ratio, and your fourth gear ratio. Fifth gear is all 1-to-1, so if that one does not get adjusted. You know, I mentioned transmissions. I also mentioned rear end gears. We carry probably about 40 different rear end ratios for all of our Elite Pro Stock teams. And you can see they're made out of beautiful billet aluminum. And let's see. I think as we move further forward here, we've got, again, with a large team like Elite Motorsports, in this trailer we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 spare motors, all ready to plug and play. This one's got a little love note on it. Needs a little adjustment before it heads into someone's race car. We've got spark plugs that are all numbered by cylinder head hole. And what that allows us to do is we can, before we ever get to the racetrack, we know what cylinder head has what thread pattern in it. And if we need to put a new spark plug in it, it's as easy as coming, I need a number 19, pull this out, ready to go put it right in. So again, all the homework is done, you know, Monday after the race, Tuesday after the race, Wednesday after the race, and then Thursday at the next race, all this gets set up. The crew chiefs have all their weather determinations, the logbooks from the previous race that they kind of start a game plan for the weekend, and the teams have everything ready to go. So that's kind of a look inside a Pro Stock run, what happens between rounds, and some of the storage and maintenance items that we carry. We're going to take a step through two of our haulers, and I'll show you our crew chief lounge, and that will include our two of them. As we're walking through the Elite Pro Stock pits, you'll see lots of tires around. I think we talked earlier in our segment that the crew chief can use the diameter of the tire to fine-tune the engine RPMs or the way it accelerates through the gears. So you'll see lots of tires, and they'll have anywhere from one run to about 35 or 40 runs on the tire. The more runs on the tire, probably the less grip you're going to have. So you're going to need a really good track to run a tire that has more runs on it. But the benefit to that is that tire is lighter, and less rotating mass is acceleration.
You're kind of balancing what you want basically with those.
Yeah, if you kids were worried out there about using mathematics in life someday, this whole sport, and most of your sports for that matter, you know, entail a ton of math. And I love it. I've grown up around this sport and enjoy all the different areas. As we roll through, 6-time world champ Eric Anders pit here. We've got our sponsor hospitality area up front. We travel with a chef that prepares food for about 50 of us, plus our guests, and that keeps us all, you know, usually eating at a good time of day, keeps our nutrition levels a little bit better, and hopefully keeps us at peak performance for winning races and winning championships. So here we are again at Pomona Raceway for the final race of the 2024 Mission Foods Championship season. We've got these two cars, Aaron Stanfield and his Melling engine parts, Eric Anders and her red Melling engine parts car, both vying for the coveted Mission Foods Championship. This would be Aaron comes into this event leading the point standings. It's pretty damn exciting. I'm 5th in points. Unfortunately, don't have a chance to make it a 7th championship this year, but you know, we'll be back strong next year. But come on in, I want to show you our crew chief rounds. As I mentioned, after a Pro Stock run, we take a data chip out of our computer, out of the cars, bring them in here to this lounge. The crew chiefs, 2 sets of crew chiefs. There's chassis and clutch crew chiefs, and then there's engine management crew chiefs. They both download the same information, and the engine side are looking to optimize spark and fuel as best they can to get the cars to accelerate through all 5 gears as best they can for max performance, or as we call it, max cackle. And then on the race side of things, the crew chiefs are looking at, okay, how's the balance of the car? Do we need to move weight left or right or forward or backward or higher or lower? Do we need to make adjustments to the wheelie bars? Do we need to make adjustments to the ratios of the transmission, the rear end ratio, or the tires? I mean, there's so much that goes into this. We carry, gents, how we doing?
Good.
Hey, we hit it actually at a halfway decent time where it's pretty quiet in here. See if I can, just trying to toggle to around here. There we go. So that's just a quick glance at engine RPM and a drive shaft RPM. You can see all these different channels of data that we can select on, and what that will do is allow the crew chiefs or the engine management side of things to fine-tune our Chevy hot rods. We carry onboard weather stations, so we're microprocessing the weather every minute, and you know, we measure anything from temperature to humidity to barometric pressure. We compute that into a density altitude ratio that the guys use for tuning, and we also look at how much water is in the air, not so much in humidity, but also through water grains and vapor pressure as well. So a lot goes in to a 6.5 second run in Pro Stock. So it was great to have you along today. Hope you enjoyed.